want to go ahead and get to our discussion. Not my discussion, our discussion on House of the Dragon. But before I really get into the nitty-gritty details of that episode, tell you about the premise of it, I did want to kind of just share my overall opinions on Game of Thrones. I've talked about it on my own platform here, my various other platforms, and on Double Toasted most recently on the Sunday service. It was great. It was great having Martin there and also Vanny Vanispheres there. We had a nice discussion. We all differing opinions. I like it. It always inspires the best kinds of talks and conversations in my opinion. But I did want to kind of just share my, overall thoughts on the original series. For those who don't know, but before the first season came out, before the first episode, I had never heard of Game of Thrones. I was very unfamiliar with it. When it came to fantasy, I think for a lot of people, certainly of my age, bracket, my demographic, millennials, our exposure to fantasy was through stuff like, Lord of the Rings. We grew up on those movies. Maybe, Narnia, but a lot of Tolkien, a lot of C.S. Lewis. That's what we grew up with. So I really didn't have any knowledge about this book series, even though it came out originally when I was born, Chad, the original book in A Song of Ice and Fire, which is not even called Game of Thrones. It's called A Song of Ice and Fire, the series, but the first book was called The Game of Thrones, and that came out in 1991, the year I was born. So this series, at this point, is nearly 31 years old, Chad, soon to be 31 years old, which is pretty impressive. Nick, thank you for gifting a sub, and welcome to the stream, gifting a sub to Angela the Terrible. Thank you, Nick. So yeah, I didn't really know what to expect. I saw some marketing from it. I'm like, all right. I remember the marketing. I have to admit, the marketing for the first season for Game of Thrones, at least what I remember, is it's kind of weird. I'm like, oh, he got fucking Boromir, he got Sean Bean. That's kind of cool. He's the main character. I don't really recognize any of these other actors. A bunch of pretty looking people. All right, they're vying for this throne, I suppose. But then, I saw the first episode. I'm like, oh, this is fun. I was liking it. That was pretty good. But it wasn't until, I think for a lot of people say, it wasn't until, the first several episodes really got into it. I can tell you, Chad, to be honest, it was the ending of that first episode where you saw this precocious youth of what was it, Bran Stark, always climbing on shit, and his mother, you're gonna fall off and break your goddamn back, and she was right, Chad, in hindsight. Crawling over the top, he crawls up to the highest tower where he saw the queen's brother of the Game of Thrones land, Westeros, getting schnook, getting shtooped right up the ass, Chad, by her brother. Having a good old incest fuck, and he's going, oh my God. And then the brother of the queen went, you didn't see nothing, and pushed him out the window, Chad. It's like, oh, holy hell, and the episode ends that way. I'm like, well, I want to find out what happens to the brother. I'm sure he'll face repercussions in the second episode, and that was the saga of Game of Thrones. And I was for everyone for years, Chef, because this was on from 2010, 2011 to 2019, Chad. So about nearly a decade watching the show and being obsessed with it and talking about it. It was one of those kind of water cooler shows everyone loved to discuss. And I have to say, for those first certainly those first 4 seasons, I thought the show was excellent. Having those those big cultural touchstone moments that still exist in the pop culture zeitgeist. The death of Ned Stark. Because I thought Sean Bean, he's the main character of the show. And he's he's in trouble in episode 9. But how's he going to get out of this shit? He's going to be executed. How's he going to get out of this? Is he going to try to run? He's trying to escape? Is someone's going to stand up for him? Is Arya just going to go up there and just stab you? Oh shit, they just cut his head off. He's dead. And it was this is different. It was really establishing itself as something different than a lot of fantasy that I was exposed to. And then going on to season 2 and really just upping the budget and having these fantastical battles, like the Battle of the Blackwater. I was like, wow, this is so impressive. And then we got to season 3 where we had truly what I consider to be one of those cultural moments in just kind of film, film or television history. It's where we have the Red Wedding, the Reigns of Castamere, the death of Robb Stark, which was so shocking, where they just killed so many characters off. I was like, oh my God. And then in the season 4, dealing with the fallout and aftermath. It really wasn't until season 5 where where they started to run out of a little material. Because at that point, the creators of Game of Thrones, the TV series, D.B. Weiss and David Benioff, they were going off of the books and consulting of George R. R. Martin, but they had caught up to him at that point. He hadn't released all the books. And they started, basically going off of stuff that he already told him or introducing new things. It was a little weird. And so when we got to season 5, I thought like, it was a bit of a dip in quality. I thought that was the weakest season. And then we got to season 6, where I thought was excellent. I thought, oh, here we go. And then we got stuff like Battle of the Bastards. And we had, like, Cersei going crazy and blowing up the Sept. I was like, this is cool. And then we got those really truncated, very rushed seasons of season 8 and season 7, season 8, where, season 7 is probably definitely better than season 8. But by the time we got to 8, I was like, why are you rushing through all this? And it sadly gave us, one of the most disappointing finales in TV history. So much so that I noticed that Game of Thrones just completely dropped from the pop culture. Like, I've never seen that before in something. I'm sure it's happened to other things, but it completely dropped from the pop culture zeitgeist for, about 3 years now. And I was like, wow, you really spurned a lot of people. And, I mean, it doesn't cancel out all the good the show did, but even when going back and watching those scenes and watching those various seasons, it just makes you go, it's like, yeah, but I kind of know where this all ends up, and it's sad. It's kind of frustrating. It's like, damn, fuck. And anytime you bring up Game of Thrones, it's kind of like The Sopranos, where Sopranos, oh, it's an excellent show. It's so good. But, it has that shitty ending, right? And it's like, yeah, damn. And the Game of Thrones is like that. However, we knew that we were going to get another thing. Like, HBO and Warner Brothers, like, listen, we're going to capitalize on this anyway. Bill might have been disappointed by that ending. They did take some time. They didn't greenlight a sequel. They had like 2 other shows. They had like this show, House of the Dragon, another thing in some form of production. They worked on a pilot, and it was supposed to take place like 1,000 years before the events of the series, where this one takes place more like 200 or so years, a little less than 200 years. And that was going to have, it was going to focus on the Starks and dealing with the first White Walker incident and things. And apparently they filmed the pilot, but I don't know where that is now. I mean, they just said, like, they just didn't move forward with it. I think maybe because it was just the connection. It was just the connection to, like, one of the big central conflicts of Game of Thrones. They're like, let's not do that. But I don't know. I'm not sure. That's just simply speculation from me. They didn't move forward with it. I'm very curious to see that pilot, though. But then we have this one. And that brings us to House of the Dragon, which, for those that don't know, this is actually focusing on material that is already done and completed, which is the Dance of the Dragons. Matter of fact, it's referenced in the Game of Thrones TV series, chat, where it's this Targaryen civil war in which the Targaryens, at the height of their power, lost a lot of power and influence due to constant infighting, chat, about who should ascend to the Iron Throne. And it takes place about a little under 200 years before the events of the main series. And I kind of already know a lot about this story, because I did that deep dive into the wiki and everything, reading about all these characters. Like, oh, this is really cool. And so now they kind of have the opportunity to expand upon this material. It's like, okay, I know the gist of where the story is and how a lot of these where a lot of these characters end up, and if some of them survive or some of them die. I know that, but now they can kind of expand on that already existing and completed material, which I think is good, because I think that's one of the things that sadly did not work out with Game of Thrones, because they didn't really have all those books, and they, also you had Benioff and Weiss going, we just want to end this. You want to wrap it up because you want to do Star Wars and all these other projects, and look what happened with that. They now they've become, creative pariahs, chat. But in any case, I was like, I can't say that I was excited for this show, even though I know the material was like, oh, this is fun material, but I was still, like a lot of people, I was still feeling a little bit burned. But I went in, I like the marketing. I really liked the second trailer for this. The first trailer, I was like, oh, it was a good trailer, but the second trailer, I was like, oh, this looks very impressive. And then after, finally seeing the first episode of you guys not too long ago, last week, I was very impressed. I thought this was really good. This was very solid. It's damn good, chat. The first episode to me kind of serves as a solid foundation for the series overall. Obviously it already features like a very familiar aesthetic, but I feel like it's very smart to have this be separated from Game of Thrones. To a degree, obviously, to avoid the baggage tied to the previous series checks. People are still feeling that baggage. There's no doubt. Even I'm feeling a little bit of that baggage. And what I like about, at least from the first episode, because a criticism of the original Game of Thrones is it's sprawling. We're dealing with, people say like, oh, it would make sense. Like, listen, it's sprawling. It's dense material. There's a lot of information, and I feel like it's smart that, at least from the first episode, it didn't feel very overwhelming. It starts kind of small by focusing on House Targaryen, which is the house that is in control of Westeros. You know, they're the kings and the queens. And I also like that we kind of focus on the small council and only a few of its members, you know, like Lord Corlys, the Sea Snake, and, you know, Sir Otto Hightower, who is the Hand of the King. I was like, okay, we're starting small, and I think that's very smart. Another thing, too, is the money is already on full display by episode 1. You could tell, like, in the original Game of Thrones, like, not to say that they were working with a shoestring budget, by no means, but, you know, if you look at season 1 compared to season 2, there's a significant upgrade in investment in money and special effects and practical effects. It's just like, okay, yeah, the HBO and Warner Bros. Had more confidence in that show after the success of season 1. This one, it's like automatically you can see the money, and it looks great. It feels fantastical. It feels nasty and lived in. You know, it doesn't have that kind of like, it doesn't feel shiny or sleek at all, which I really like. I just like the grittiness of this world. And you have like a huge, now listen, you do have a sizable cast of characters, but so far I'm liking the cast. I'm liking the actors. We have Paddy Constantine. I thought his name is Constantine, and he's playing King Viserys the First in this show. And he's kind of portrayed where he's a warm and kind man, but he's weak. That's his problem. He's sadly he's weak, and a lot of people recognize that in him. And his whole deal is like he needs to produce an heir. You know, his wife has had numerous miscarriages. Chat. You know, they only have one daughter, Rhaenyra, who I'm going to get to in just a bit. But, you know, he has all this pressure. Even though he's the king, he has all this power. He has all this pressure placed on him. And within that episode, I thought it was great where he was given an impossible choice. And we showed that struggle, you know, with, you know, the death of his wife in that episode. Where he was presented with, like, listen, either both of them will die or we can save the kid. Outside of that, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. And he's like, oh, shit. But it also shows, like, the cruelty of this world and how women are pretty much, you know, considered, you know, brood mares and livestock, just popping out babies. It's like the least you could have done was told her what was going to happen. He's like, no, we got to hold you down. Do it. It just shows you the layers of gray in this show. And I just really like that. I really like that scene. Outside of him, I think for a lot of us who have already seen this, at least the first episode, the standout was Matt Smith as Prince Daemon Targaryen, who is the younger brother of King Viserys. He is, I mean, at first he seems like you're the villain. You're evil, you're brutal. But again, he kind of feels like Jaime Lannister to a degree if I were to compare him to another character from the previous series. It's like his methods are brutal, and he's also very blunt. But then he does have this code of you know, that he does follow. Where he's very harsh with criminals. It's like, listen, if you're a fucking rapist, I'm just gonna cut your goddamn balls off. I'm gonna cut your balls and your penis off and castrate you. If you're a thief, I'm gonna cut your hand off. Like, shit. You know, whereas his brother is very indecisive, he is decisive. He's just brutal with his methods. But then there's also kind of this, there is this softness to him, and like he has this special relationship like with his niece. Rhaenyra, where he's like, you know, after, you know, the whole scene with Viserys losing his wife and losing his child, he's like, all right, you got to be there for your father, but my father doesn't want me there. He's like, he doesn't, I know, but you need to be there for him now. Like, I like that we're seeing like all these different sides of him. He's complicated, and he's also a dick. He can also be a dick. Like, probably one of my favorite scenes in that episode was the confrontation between Daemon and Viserys, where, you know, Daemon, who's in this brothel, and this is after the death of Viserys' son, who dies like a few days later. And I love that, like, oh, you know, he raises his cup and he says, oh, you know, to the king for a day. And it was like, ooh. And I love that, and that later on when he's confronted by his brother, like, did you say that? And he's like, and you can tell he regrets it. He actually really regrets saying that. And he's like, listen, we all mourn our own way. And he's like, you fucking ass. And I love that back and forth that they had in that. I thought that was really, really good. And so far, at least from that first episode, he's my favorite character. But I also really like, Rhaenyra. Now, we have 2 actresses playing Rhaenyra, apparently. You have the adult version we have not yet seen, but right now we've just been with Millie Alcock, which I don't know if I don't think I've seen her in anything else. And, she is chosen as the successor, as the first, what would be the first queen sitting upon the Iron Throne, which a lot of people don't like. This is a very sexist, male-dominated society. And I'm really interested to see what kind of the repercussions of that will be. But I like her. She's a little spitfire. She has her own opinions, her own thoughts. She's also trying to find herself. I like her relationship with her uncle. I think that's very interesting. But so far, the actress who's playing her, I think, just does a really good job. And then you have some additional characters too. We have Emily Carey, who plays Rhaenyra's best friend, Alicent, good old Allie chat. And I don't know what they're putting that poor girl through. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be weird. Where she's trying to be both a good friend, but she's also, working the behest of her father, Sir Otto Hightower, who I'm like, this guy's a son of a bitch, played by Rhys Ifans, the lizard chap from the Spider-Man movies. Where I just love that scene they have in that first episode. He's like, oh, listen, like after, the death of the king's wife, he's like, listen, you should go comfort the king. He loves history. Bring him a book. Also, wear that fucking dress that shows off your boobs. Yeah, do that one. I was like, oh, this is, again, he's still manipulating. So far, like Sir Otto Hightower, he kind of feels like, I guess, like if I were to say like what his equivalent character is from Game of Thrones is kind of like Tywin Lannister, Charles Dance's character. I'm like, ooh, you're a manipulative son of a bitch. I'm curious to see what's going to happen to him, chap. But he's also vying for power. And then you have another person who sadly has been getting like a lot of hate online because I guess they changed the race of the character. But that's Steve Toussaint. I think that's how you say his name. And his name is Lord Corlys, and he's called the Sea Snake. And he's like part of he's one of the old Valyrian houses that the Targaryens were also from. And so like they escaped from like old Valyria. And he like ascended this thing called like the Driftwood Throne, and he is all about like shipping. He has his own political manipulations going on. I'm like, this is really cool. And so I really like him. He also brings like this gravitas as well, and he feels like a natural rival to Sir Otto Hightower, on the Small Council. There's other members of the Small Council which I don't really know, but those are the 2 ones they at least have been focusing on. And so I like that. So already we're kind of getting into the backstabbing and the political manipulation within the first episode, which I think is really cool. But yeah, I think, oh, and also I forgot to mention this. You also have Eve Best, who plays Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, who was, what could have been like the first queen sitting upon the Iron Throne, but she was, picked over because Viserys is the one that got it. And so she was picked over. And I like her because she is also married to Sir Lord Corlys. And so I kind of want to see how like that relationship play out. Because she also feels like a major power play. They always say that she was the queen who never was. Which I'd be like, fucking stop calling me that. Like, you had one goddamn knight who's like, oh, can I have the favor of the queen who never was? And I'd be like, fuck you. No, you don't have my goddamn favor. I like her a lot. She's not the Spitfire. Her and Rhaenyra seem very similar to each other. So I'm interested to see how that relationship's going to be. We don't really see too much, but I'm betting there's going to be a lot more with her, chat. But yeah, then there's other characters that I can go into, but at least that's like the main cast, and everyone does a great job. Like no one feels like I don't think there's any bad acting. It all feels very earnest. I'm like seeing, all the various sides and the power play so far. It's like, yeah, this is more Game of Thrones, just in another era, chat. Where we're kind of at peace before everything, I imagine, eventually falls apart. And so it's kind of like a powder keg, if you will, right now, just waiting to explode. So yeah, it's a solid first episode. I'm very excited going to season 2 episode 2, and the rest of this series, which they say is 10 episodes. They already greenlit it for season 2, and they said they wanted to do like about 3 or 4 seasons, which makes sense based on the story. I feel like they're going to do a lot of time jumps, at least for the first season, to set certain things up for the Dance of Dragons, which is the Civil War. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it, chat. I thought it was very solid foundational episode, and can't wait to see what happens in the future. But that's just kind of my opinions. I mean, what are your guys' opinions on Game of Thrones right now? Or excuse me, Game of Thrones. And what was your opinions on the first episode for House of the Dragon? Are you looking forward to the future of this property? Because HBO and Warner Bros. They said we are going to be greenlighting a bunch of other shows. Apparently, there's going to be a seafaring one, kind of like pirate themed. There's that Jon Snow one, which is happening with Kit Harington, which is going to probably act as a sequel series of Game of Thrones. There's an animated thing. There's one that allegedly is going to take place on this jungle Game of Thrones continent called Sothoris, and it's like, oh, wow. So there's a lot going on, Chad, so I'm interested to see what gets greenlit and what doesn't. But so far, good. Good first episode, Chad. Really liked it. What about the rest of you guys? How you feeling about House of the Dragons, and what was your opinions on Game of Thrones? Sick bastard told his daughter to wear his dead mother's dress. Fucked up, man. He's fucked up. No, Serrano's fucked up. Yeah. The Seafarer one sounds really cool. I wonder if that might be Arya, though. I wonder, because, she has her goddamn boat. I'm really curious about that. I like the story of the Dance of Dragons years back. I'm hoping for the best for this. All the other stuff coming out, though, can't say I care about it. Yeah, no, I mean, I understand that. Again, it's more of like, okay, let me, I want to wait till the first episode. Or maybe the first several episodes to really say, like, all right, this is worth seeing. So I understand your hesitance. I think apparently they're doing something with Sothoris. Yeah. Which we don't know anything about, really. You just know it's like a poisonous jungle continent with, like huge temples that people can't access. When you think about Game of Thrones, it really is a story about a bunch of people fighting over who gets to sit on the world's ugliest chair that fucking constantly pricks you and stabs you and makes your back rot. These shows are made for these reasons. The 3 Fs. Fighting, fucking, and fatalities. I love it. You haven't seen Game of Thrones? Dylan Murray, you should check it out, man. Maybe check out House of the Dragon, since it's, it takes place nearly 200 years before the events of the main show. I think that's what works out about it. It was very smart to, like, okay, listen, we don't want to have that much baggage attached. You want to be a little bit more accessible, so it's not going to be a sequel series. It's very much going to be a prequel. I think that was smart. Ever want to sit on that fucking thing? Not as much fucking on this show as before. Yeah, well, in the first episode, there's a lot of I will say, there is a lot of fucking in the first episode, chap. Matt Smith is the saddest boy at the orgy. Yes. Like Steelers, Game of Thrones to me is like Dragon Ball to Corey. My watch with my girlfriend explains everything. Ah, very nice. And has anyone thought of putting a cushion? I'm sure someone has. tore up the cushion, I imagine, I expect. Yeah. Yeah, but so far, chat, I'm liking what I've seen. I'm liking what I've seen. Let's see what you guys are saying. Step down and see what you doing. Naya, have you watched House the Dragon? What'd you think? This show should just be renamed Sweet Home King's Landing. I like that. That's a good name. That's a good alt title. Yes. Chris drinking a cup of Joe instead of a class. And I go, oh, actually, it's just tea. I don't know. I'm like, my allergies are kind of acting up, so I've been drinking a little tea today. Make myself feel a little bit better. It's a citrus tea. It's apple citrus tea. My favorite. Bishop's Gore never got past season 1 for Game of Thrones. Just do not want to commit the time. I get there's a lot. It's a big investment and, kind of does end disappointingly. So I understand. I haven't watched it yet, but only read the first Game of Thrones novel. What do you think of the first novel, Berserker? When does Sir Coffee Cup return? Oh, it's funny. So I was reading the other day. The guy who plays the character, the sexy guy, Kristen Cole, he apparently was trying to sneak coffee cups into various scenes that he was in, which I thought was really funny. Yeah, I guess he's going to be a big player, apparently, later on, which I'm very interested to see. Yeah, but apparently I already read a little bit about him, like, a while ago, like, years ago. I was like, oh, this guy. But he's like, he ain't a one-off. He's going to stick around for a while. You like that, Berserker? Nice. And so water bottle, Lord Coffee Cup, and so water bottle. Maybe they'll show. Do you blame George R. R. Martin for not at least finishing? I mean, it's frustrating that he hasn't finished these books. He's been writing them for 30 fucking years. He hasn't finished the mainline series. However, what gives me confidence in this is just that this story's done. It's already been told. We already know. I mean, I already know what happens. I know who lives and I know who dies. At least, well, not everyone, but I know what happens at the very end. Because of just learning about the Dance of Dragons. For those that don't know, they did this whole animated It's on like all the Blu-rays of Game of Thrones, and they also been uploaded to YouTube. But they did like this long series about the Dance of Dragons, and it was actually really fucking good. And they brought back a lot of the original actors to like do narration for it, and it was really really awesome. And they already told the story. I was like, oh shit. Like some of the characters that I'm seeing like in the show, I was like, oh, this guy, and I was like, oh, all right, I see how this is all connecting. So yeah. I think the fact that they already kind of finished it and already know what it's going to happen is it's going to be probably going to end much stronger. But now at this point, they can just fill in with more content. They can expand upon these characters and give them more personality. So I think, which is good, which I think is a really good thing. Yes. That fat fuck is never going to finish those books. Oh no. Sleazy mirror. No, he didn't miss it. I just finished. I did like a bit of a review for House of the Dragon, sharing my thoughts on the series, what to expect, and my opinions on Game of Thrones as well. You're good. Should bring damn house here. Yeah, no, we're gonna do a watch party later on for episode 2. Yeah, so watch the animated series, the Dance of Dragon voice, but yeah, it was good, right? That was fucking awesome. Ace Rock, Fire and Blood is great, but the stories about Sir Duncan the Tall and yeah, I'm sure they'll do a series about that. Yeah. Then they're going to kill the black dude the most fucked up way. I don't know. Well, yeah, we'll see. I don't know if this show is going to follow the trope of if you're white, you're going to be all right. If you're brown, you're going down. I don't know. I was watching a bunch of bloopers of the old show. Watch Peter Dinklage sing Good King during his trial scene was the most. Oh, that's pretty funny. Very nice. Yeah, Chad. In any case, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited. Thought this first episode was really good. I'm very happy that we're gonna be doing a watch party for this entire season going forward. So yeah, hope it all ends well. Chad.